What if one moment of cruelty could shatter a child's Christmas morning forever? At the elegant Grandview Hotel's annual Christmas party, the crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables filled with laughter and joy. But in the corner, a 34-year-old waitress named Jessica trembled as she wiped tears from her eyes, her uniform stained with spilled champagne. Moments earlier, billionaire tech mogul Richard Blackwood had humiliated her in front of everyone, his harsh words cutting deeper than any knife. "You're disgusting, don't breathe near us," he'd shouted, his face twisted with disgust when she accidentally brushed against his table while serving dessert. But what Richard didn't know was that his 7-year-old daughter Mia had witnessed everything from across the room, her innocent eyes filling with confusion and shame. Sometimes, the smallest hearts carry the biggest lessons about what truly matters in this world. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Jessica had been working at the Grandview Hotel for 3 years, and Christmas Eve was always the busiest night of the year. The annual charity gala brought together the city's wealthiest families, all gathered to celebrate the season and raise money for local children's hospitals. She'd been looking forward to this evening because the tips were generous, and she desperately needed the extra money to buy Christmas presents for her 2 young children at home. Richard Blackwood sat at table 7 with his wife Caroline and their daughter Mia. At 42, he'd built a technology empire that made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. His success had come at a cost, though. Years of ruthless business deals had hardened his heart, making him forget the values his own father had tried to teach him. Tonight, he wore his arrogance like an expensive suit, treating the hotel staff as if they were invisible. "Daddy, why are there so many people here?" 7-year-old Mia asked, her bright green eyes scanning the crowded ballroom with wonder. She wore a beautiful red velvet dress that her grandmother had sent from Paris, her blonde hair tied with ribbons that matched her outfit. "It's a party for important people, sweetheart," Richard replied, barely looking up from his phone where he was reviewing stock prices. "People who matter." Caroline shot her husband a warning look. "Richard, not tonight. It's Christmas Eve." But Richard's mood had been sour all evening. His latest business acquisition was running into legal troubles, and he'd spent most of the day arguing with lawyers. The stress made him irritable, and he took his frustration out on anyone within reach. Jessica approached their table carefully, balancing a tray of desserts and champagne glasses. She'd served difficult customers before, but something about Richard's cold demeanor made her nervous. As she leaned over to place the chocolate mousse in front of Mia, her elbow accidentally brushed against Richard's shoulder. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Richard jerked away as if he'd been burned, his face contorting with disgust. "Watch where you're going," he barked, loud enough that nearby tables turned to stare. "I'm so sorry, sir," Jessica whispered, her face flushing red with embarrassment. "I didn't mean to." "You're disgusting." Richard's voice rose even higher, filled with venom that seemed to poison the festive air around them. "Don't breathe near us. Get away from our table." The entire ballroom fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, silverware clinked against plates, and even the orchestra seemed to pause. Jessica's hands shook as she tried to clean up the champagne that had splashed onto the white tablecloth, her eyes filling with tears that she fought desperately to hold back. From across the table, little Mia watched in horror as her father continued his tirade. She'd never seen him like this before, so angry, so mean to someone who seemed kind. The waitress looked like she might cry, and Mia's own eyes began to water in sympathy. "That's enough," Caroline hissed under her breath, grabbing her husband's arm. But the damage was already done. Jessica hurried away from the table, her Christmas spirit shattered along with her dignity. What Mia saw that night would change everything, setting in motion a chain of events that would transform not just Christmas morning, but the very heart of her family. The ride home that night was eerily quiet. Mia sat in the back seat of their black Mercedes, staring out the window at the Christmas lights decorating houses in their wealthy neighborhood. Usually, she'd bounce with excitement, pointing out every decorated tree and inflatable Santa. But tonight, her small heart was heavy with confusion and shame. "Daddy," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "Why were you so mean to that lady?" Richard glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his jaw tightening. She was clumsy and unprofessional, Mia. Sometimes people need to be taught lessons. But she said sorry, Mia pressed, her green eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. And she looked really sad. Her eyes were all watery like mine get when I'm hurt. Caroline turned in her seat to face their daughter. Sweetie, Daddy was having a difficult day. Sometimes adults make mistakes when they're stressed. But Mia shook her head slowly. Teacher says we should always be kind, especially to people who are working hard to help us. The pretty waitress was just trying to bring us a yummy dessert. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the waitress's face, how her smile had completely disappeared after Daddy yelled at her. She remembered how her own mother had taught her to always say please and thank you, to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their job or how much money they had. Meanwhile, downstairs, Richard poured himself a scotch and tried to push the evening's events from his mind. But Caroline wasn't going to let it go so easily. That was embarrassing tonight, she said quietly, joining him in his study. The way you treated that poor woman was cruel, Richard. What's happened to you? Richard's face hardened. I work hard for this lifestyle, Caroline. I expect basic competence from service staff. If they can't handle their jobs properly, they shouldn't be working at prestigious establishments. She accidentally brushed your shoulder, Richard. She didn't commit a crime. It's about standards, he snapped. About maintaining respect for success and achievement. These people need to understand their place. But even as the words left his mouth, Richard felt a strange uneasiness in his chest. Something about his daughter's innocent questions had planted a seed of doubt that he couldn't quite shake. He'd built his fortune by being tough, by demanding perfection, by never showing weakness. But tonight, seeing Mia's disappointed expression in the rearview mirror made him wonder if perhaps he'd gone too far. The next morning was Christmas, and Mia woke up early as children do on the most magical day of the year. But instead of running to see what Santa had brought her, she climbed into her parents' bed with tears in her eyes. I had a bad dream about the nice waitress, she whispered, snuggling against her mother. I dreamed that she was crying, and her children didn't get any Christmas presents because Daddy made her too sad to work. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Caroline's breath caught in her throat. Out of the mouths of babes came wisdom that neither parent had expected. This Christmas morning was about to become a turning point that would challenge everything Richard thought he believed about success, kindness, and what it truly meant to be a good man. Richard tried to brush off his daughter's words, but they clung to his conscience like morning frost that refused to melt. As Mia opened her Christmas presents with less enthusiasm than usual, he found himself distracted, his mind wandering back to the waitress's face. Jessica. He'd heard the hotel manager call her Jessica when he'd watched her hurry away to the kitchen. Daddy, look. Mia held up a new doll, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Santa brought me Princess Aurora. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Richard replied absently, but Caroline noticed his lack of focus. Later that morning, while Mia played quietly with her new toys, Caroline sat beside her husband on their living room sofa. She's not herself today, Richard. Our daughter's Christmas is ruined because she's worried about a stranger. Doesn't that tell you something? Richard wanted to argue, to defend his actions, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he found himself remembering his own father, a humble carpenter who had worked 2 jobs to put Richard through college. His father had always treated everyone with dignity, from the bank president to the grocery store clerk. Success doesn't give you permission to look down on others, his father had often said. It gives you the responsibility to lift them up. That afternoon, while Caroline and Mia baked Christmas cookies, Richard found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He looked up the waitress online. The Grandview Hotel's employee directory wasn't public, but his connections and resources made it easy enough to find information. Jessica Martinez, 34, single mother of 2. She worked 3 jobs to support her family after her husband had died in a car accident 2 years ago. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just some careless employee who deserved his wrath. This was a woman fighting to survive, working on Christmas Eve to provide for her children. She probably hadn't seen her own kids that night because she was serving dessert to his family. "Daddy!" Mia appeared in the doorway of his office, still wearing her Christmas pajamas. "Can we go see the waitress lady? I want to say sorry for making her sad." Richard's throat tightened. "Mia, honey, it wasn't your fault. Daddy was the one who—" "But I didn't say anything when you were being mean," Mia interrupted, her 7-year-old wisdom cutting straight to the heart of things. "Teacher says if we see someone being hurt and we don't help, we're hurting them too. I should have told you to stop." Those words shattered something deep inside Richard's chest. His own daughter was taking responsibility for his failures, carrying guilt that belonged to him. He knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that held more moral clarity than he'd shown in years. "You're right, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Daddy made a terrible mistake. And you know what? Maybe we should go apologize." Caroline appeared behind Mia, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband's transformation. "Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Can we take her something nice?" Mia asked hopefully. "Maybe some of our Christmas cookies? And flowers like you bring mommy when you mess up." For the first time in years, Richard felt his heart truly open. His daughter was teaching him what it meant to be human again, one innocent question at a time. This Christmas was about to become a lesson in redemption that none of them would ever forget. Within an hour, Richard, Caroline, and Mia were dressed and driving through a very different part of the city. Jessica's address led them to a modest apartment complex where Christmas decorations were handmade, and children's bicycles were lined up in the small courtyard. The contrast to their gated community was stark, but Mia pressed her nose against the window with curiosity rather than judgment. "Look, Daddy, they have Christmas lights too," she exclaimed, pointing to strings of colorful bulbs that someone had carefully hung around a playground. "They're pretty." Richard's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as they parked. What was he doing here? What if Jessica didn't want to see him? What if she called the police? But one look at his daughter's hopeful face gave him the courage to continue. They climbed the stairs to apartment 2B, Mia carrying a plate of cookies wrapped in red cellophane and Caroline holding a beautiful bouquet of white roses. Richard carried something else, a heavy weight of regret that he was finally ready to set down. When Jessica opened the door, her face went pale. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked exhausted. Behind her, 2 young children peered out curiously, a boy about 9 and a girl who couldn't have been more than 5. "Mr. Blackwood?" Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here?" Before Richard could speak, Mia stepped forward. "Hi, I'm Mia, and I wanted to say sorry for last night. My daddy was really mean to you, and it made me feel sick in my tummy because you were just trying to help us." Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at the little girl. "Oh, sweetie, you don't need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong." "But I didn't stop him," Mia said seriously. "And we brought you cookies because Christmas cookies make everything better. Mommy said so." Richard found his voice, though it came out rough with emotion. "Jessica, I owe you an enormous apology. My behavior last night was inexcusable. I was having a difficult day, but that's no excuse for treating you with such cruelty. I'm deeply ashamed." Jessica stared at him in shock. In her 3 years of service work, she'd never had a customer apologize for anything, let alone a millionaire showing up at her door on Christmas Day. "I also brought these." Caroline stepped forward with the flowers. "And Richard has something else for you." Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I know this can't undo what I said or how I made you feel, but I want to help. This is a check for $50,000. Not because I think money fixes everything, but because everyone deserves to enjoy Christmas without worrying about bills." Jessica's legs nearly gave out. $50,000 would change everything for her family. No more working 3 jobs, no more choosing between groceries and rent, no more lying awake at night worried about her children's future. "I can't accept this," she whispered, but tears were streaming down her face. "Please." Richard said softly. Let me do one good thing to balance out my terrible behavior. You have beautiful children who deserve the world, just like mine do. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. This was the moment when everything changed, when pride gave way to humility, when wealth found its true purpose, and when a child's innocent heart guided three adults towards something none of them had expected to find on Christmas Day: grace. Jessica's children, Miguel and Sophia, slowly approached the door as their mother struggled with whether to accept such an incredible gift. 9-year-old Miguel looked up at Richard with the same directness his daughter possessed. "Are you the man who made my mama cry?" Miguel asked, his protective instincts evident despite his young age. Richard knelt down to meet the boy's eyes. "Yes, I am. And I'm here to say I'm very sorry. Your mama is a wonderful person, and I treated her badly." "Why did you do it?" Miguel pressed, his arm moving protectively around his little sister Sophia. "Because I forgot something very important," Richard replied honestly. "I forgot that being successful doesn't make you better than anyone else. Your mama works very hard to take care of you, and I should have respected that instead of being cruel." Sophia, who had been quietly observing, suddenly stepped forward and took Mia's hand. "Want to see my Christmas tree?" she asked shyly. "It's small, but Mama let us put all the decorations on it ourselves." As the two girls walked toward the living room together, chattering about their favorite ornaments, the adults followed. Jessica's apartment was tiny but filled with love, handmade decorations, photos of precious moments, and a small tree that somehow seemed to glow brighter than the massive one in Richard's mansion. "This is beautiful, Jessica," Caroline said sincerely, looking at the carefully arranged nativity scene on a side table. "Your children are lucky to have such a loving mother." Jessica wiped her eyes and finally spoke. "I accept your apology, Mr. Blackwood. And, if you're certain about the check, I accept that too. You'll never know how much this means to us." Richard watched as Mia and Sophia arranged cookies on a plate together, sharing stories about what Santa had brought them. His daughter was learning something no private school could teach: that joy comes from kindness, not possessions. "I have one more request," Richard said quietly. "I'd like to offer you a job at my company. We need someone in our family services department, someone who understands what real families go through. The salary would be 3 times what you're making now, with full benefits and normal hours." Jessica's hand flew to her heart. "Are you serious?" "Completely. And I promise, you'll never have to worry about being treated with anything less than complete respect." As they prepared to leave, Mia hugged both Miguel and Sophia tightly. "Can they come to my birthday party?" she asked her father. "I want them to meet my other friends." Richard smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Of course they can, sweetheart." 6 months later, Richard would find himself at his office Christmas party, watching Jessica coordinate the children's charity drive she'd proposed. Mia would be helping serve cookies to families in need, and Caroline would be teaching Sophia piano lessons every Saturday. The Blackwood family had discovered that true wealth came not from what you accumulated, but from what you gave away, and what you learned from a 7-year-old girl who understood kindness better than any adult. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in our smallest packages, the innocent wisdom of children who see the world not as it is, but as it should be. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales that remind us what really matters in this world.